Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what should I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill, make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. That is Jesus speaking to his disciples and the Pharisees in Luke 16, 1 through 15. And it's an interesting passage because this is, if you're a Christian, this is a very difficult parable to understand because it almost feels like um, Jesus is saying to him, hey, um, be a shrewd manager, that's the best thing that you could possibly do, which kind of runs counter to how we understand Jesus and his message and what he's trying to do. There's some different things that I take out of this though as a business owner. Um, First of all, just to summarize, he was accused of wasting his possessions. He had to give an account to the master, and he was no longer going to be a manager. And there's like two things that jump out to me. First of all, he says he's not strong enough to dig. He's too ashamed to beg. But why would he have had to have done either? If he was accountable for what he was given, then he should have something left over. Maybe he should have had some savings, or he should have owned some land, or maybe some goats or some sheep, or whatever they did in those days, but he didn't. Then the manager says to him, you've acted shrewdly. And I had to look up the word shrewdly because I didn't really know what it meant, but it meant prudent or wisely. And so when we see Jesus giving this parable and he says the manager called him shrewd, it really means he was shrewd for his own purposes. Like the manager was looking out for himself. And so if I tie back the fact that this individual is looking out for themselves, they were being fired because they were wasting the possessions that their master had given to them. They weren't strong enough to dig. They were too ashamed to beg, which meant the only jobs they could go and do were probably like the worst of the worst jobs. And so I think of that and I think of Jesus sharing that and telling his disciples. I think he was maybe trying to give a dig to the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders at the time, who truly misunderstood Jesus brought to them how much they misunderstood the Bible. And so it's constantly humorous to hear how he argues with them. But as a manager, I don't think I want to be in a position to beg or dig. I should have something to show for my efforts. Now, that doesn't mean being a billionaire or trillionaire or wealth or homes or vacation properties or anything like that. But I think that when compared to, am I going to be in a position to beg or dig, that would mean that I wasn't a good steward, even from my own benefit. And Jesus says this manager called him shrewd, which meant that he was trying to like get a result for himself, but he wasn't trying to get a result for others. I think that I would want to demonstrate that I was trusted with a little bit and I was given more, and that my abilities and talents enabled me to be trusted with more. Not, I was not trusted. I was, what I had was taken from me, and I can't even beg or dig because I did such a poor job managing the opportunity. My strategy and hope is not to trust others to help me out, which is what I think this manager did, which was like, hey, you owe my master this, let's cut it in half. You owe him this, let's cut it in half. He was really just trying to protect himself. He really had no vision, no opportunity to look to others for help. And I think that the fact that he had nothing, that his only options were to dig and beg, was just like this reminder that we're called to serve people by subduing the things in this world that cause them angst or friction. Certainly, as business owners, I think we can design products and services that remove friction from people's lives so that they can experience all that God has given them the opportunity to experience. And I think that a good manager should have never been fired, honestly. If the manager is looking at himself and is dependent upon himself for his own results, uh, clearly Jesus is saying, like, you're just not going to have a spot. There isn't anything for you. And I honestly, as a Christian, I don't want to waste what God has given me. I think that a meaningful life means trusting God, building a relationship with Him. I think that happens by managing the talents and the resources and the people that He's put under my care. And I think that the reason why it matters to knowing God is because that's what makes life meaningful. That's where peace comes from. I think that's where joy comes from. I think that's where hope comes from. And the alternative to me, presented by the world or by other religions or by other philosophies, doesn't seem to quite check all of those boxes. There's a certain level of freedom that comes from knowing God created me in His image. He has a purpose for my life. He has put me exactly where He wants me to be right now. I happen to be a husband, a father, and a business owner. And so, what does that mean? And I've taken that to mean I'm meant to go and bring order to chaos and remove friction from people's lives in whatever capacity that is happening with how my skills and talents can be used to try and fix it. So this parable in Luke 16 with the shrewd manager, this idea of, was I trusted with a little bit? Was I faithful with much? Because the story of the shrewd manager tells me that that's not the outcome that I want. In Jesus's life, I think sort of sitting on top of all of this is this idea that quietly during his career, the shrewd manager wasn't doing the things he knows he should have been doing. When I look to the life of Jesus, I think to myself, what should I have been doing as a business owner to not end up in the position of the shrewd manager? And I think that means like living a quiet life. That means, in Luke 2:51 to 52, we hear about Jesus just went unnoticed for like 30 years of his life, just being in a small town, growing in wisdom. He was faithful with whatever God had put into his hands before he became a public figure. Um, in Mark 16:1 to 3, the people in his town only kind of knew him as a carpenter. They didn't realize that in him being faithful with all the ordinary work that he was given, that would end up providing him with the 3 years, 3.5 years of his ministry, where he would end up changing history for all of mankind. And then in Luke 16:10, he says that whoever is faithful with very little will be faithful with much. Again, back to the shrewd manager parable. And I find something really appealing in that. I find a sense of, the world will tell you go and pursue the riches of the world, but we all know, if we're being honest, that the riches of the world really don't offer us anything. They offer us like monetary enjoyment. They scratch that selfish itch that we have to experience something that very few people can experience, but they don't provide anything that's lasting. As business owners, we're provided with this amazing opportunity to get up every day, to lead people, to manage resources, to allocate capital, allocate our time, etc., to push the walls of God's kingdom further out into the world, meaning as we remove friction in the world, as we're able to build products and services that make people's lives better, tangibly better, not like I run a liquor store and I sell liquor better, but an opportunity to say, for example, we have a construction business, or our family owns a construction business, and we try to be the best place for the type of worker that does the kind of work that we do. We want to be the best payer. We want to provide them with the best health benefits. We want to provide them with a career path. Whether they take advantage of all of that or not, that's not on me. My job's not to subdue people, it's to serve them. But that's meaningful. The folks that work under our care, they take their paychecks home, they provide for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and all of that has this perpetuating cycle and momentum of making things better out in the world. In the AI data agency that I have, we're focused on helping businesses um, get people doing higher value work. Some of the most expensive people in a business are just simply moving like numbers and data between systems. And so if we can get technology to take care of that, that means that these people can probably use their skills and their talents and their experience in a much more productive and valuable way that makes them feel good, because no one feels good about just transposing information. They feel good when they're contributing to something that is creating value, and it's valuable to the company because that's real money that's going out to pay for that particular job to be done. And so the shrewd manager is like, this parable is just a great reminder to me that if all I have at the end of my life is I have to beg and dig and I'm not good enough to do either of those things, that like I really, really missed the mark. That a shrewd manager, first of all, would have never been fired. A shrewd manager would have never had what was given to him taken away because he was a poor manager. That he wouldn't have been looking inward to protect himself. He would have first been concerned with others, because that is what we see in the life of Christ. And that the reason any of this even matters is because this is where I think we find the greatest fulfillment, when we are pursuing things that are bigger than us. And as business owners, the market is much bigger than us, and it's kind of a bottomless well of opportunity for us to um, emulate Christ out in the world, knowing that he was perfect. We're never going to be. But if I follow his model, then that gives me a life worth living.